Welcome, Chip, to the Museum of Haywood County History in Clyde, North Carolina.
Thank you. I've been here before, and I love being here.
Well, and you've been here before when it was originally the house that was about to fall down before Preservation North Carolina bought it.
Yes, I did.
And then Dr. Hall, fortunately, who's a Shook descendant, came along and decided to save the house, purchase it, and eventually turned it over to the Historical Society to take care of. And what we're trying to do is to document all the history we can about Haywood County, not just this house. And I know the Killians go way back in the beginning of Haywood County, and I thought the first thing we could do is just have you tell us a little bit about the Killian descendancy that from your ancestor, where he came from, and then kind of how it turned out that you've been here. You've been one of the longest members of historical efforts and Rotary and other things, and we'd just like to hear something from you.
Well, I'm a descendant of three different branches of people, old people in Haywood County: the Alleys, the Killians, and the Shooks, as well as the Browns.
Mm-hmm.
So you're interested in me telling about the Killians, huh?
Well, all of them, but let's start with the Killians. And
well, there was a Killian named Daniel Killian who settled on Jonathan's Creek, and his father, his grandfather maybe it was Andreas Killian, who came from Germany before the Revolutionary War. He came down into Philadelphia, and then eventually they came down through the Shenandoah Valley and settled in Conover, North Carolina.
But he started in Philly. He came to the port of Philadelphia.
That's right, he did, and he had several sons, and half of them supported the king, and half of them supported the colonists. So they were all split up. But he settled there in Conover, which is near Hickory, Catawba County, and had a bunch of kids. And one of them eventually came to Jonathan's Creek. It might have been his grandson that came to Jonathan's Creek, and he's buried out there in the plot cemetery in Jonathan's Creek.
You know what year that was?
I have it written down, but I didn't memorize it.
Roughly?
Early 1800s, I'd say.
Early 1800s, yeah. Haywood County really didn't see a whole lot of settlers till the early part of the 19th century.
Yeah. So he came there, and he had a son who ended up moving to Henderson County, and he was on the committee. The son was, his name was James Watts Killian, and he was on the committee that formed both Henderson County and Transylvania County, and he had a bunch of children, and one of them was Daniel Marcus Killian, the one that Mr. Nolan and I were talking about a minute ago. And Daniel Marcus Killian was a Civil War veteran,
Mm-hmm.
who was too young to join the Confederacy because he was only 15, but he joined as a courier toward the end of the war, and rode because he was a great horseman. He knew his way around the trails of eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina, so he delivered messages to the Confederate officers during that period of time, and he's the one that delivered the message to General Martin of the surrender at Appomattox.
Oh, wow.
And there's a plaque right near the Bogarts on Main Street about that. Doesn't mention his name, but it's
Martin's surrender. Yeah.
Martin's surrender.
Mm-hmm.
He delivered that message. So that particular Killian married the descendant of the Shooks, Nancy Shook Brown, married Walter Brown, and Walter Brown's daughter was married to Daniel Marcus Killian. I got that wrong, but Daniel Marcus Killian, one of his daughters was Nancy Shook Brown, because she married Walter Brown.
Okay.
And she was the Shook the David Shook descended here. It's on the plaque right there.
Mm-hmm.
And Brown Avenue was named after Walter Brown.
Okay.
You know, it runs through Hazelwood and Waynesville.
Right.
Daniel Marcus Killian started same guy we were talking about, started the woolen mill, which is at the corner of Old Hickory and Killian Street. kind of down below, between the junior high school and middle school, now it's called, and Sulphur Springs Road.
Oh, okay.
Down that way, on this side of Richland Creek. So he had the woolen mill there.
Was that before the railroad, between the railroad and
yeah,
the
before
creek?
the railroad. And so he wanted to generate hydroelectricity. So he went up. He had his house was right there below Brown Avenue, below where Dr. Stuart Robertson lived, that we all remember, one of the first general practitioners here in Waynesville. And so he lived down there, and he built a dam on Richland Creek and diverted part of the water out of Richland Creek into a mill race, which he constructed and went down towards where the woolen mill was to run a water wheel. So he put a water wheel in, and the water wheel generated electricity for the woolen mill as well. And then later he sold single phase electricity to the town of Waynesville. That was Waynesville's first street lights.
Oh, wow.
And the day we had the show and tell here, I left the book here on the history of Carolina Power and Light Company. There's a whole chapter in there about this very story I'm telling you. Because later Mr. Sloan took over the electric business, and that's how HEPCO was formed out the river. That became more of a public power source.
Utility, yeah.
Utility. That's right.
Okay. So the early, I guess you call it growth, industrialization of Waynesville from its services, electricity, telephone, all that. Your descendant was very instrumental in all that, or involved with it.
Well, he had the first electric power. And their story, and this is in that book that I left here for the show and tell, about how when they started, they first piped or transmitted single phase electricity to the town of Waynesville for streetlights. But later they started sending it across the Richland Creek over to this White Sulphur Springs Hotel, which was an iconic hotel at that time. Woodrow Wilson spent his honeymoon there. It was a famous place, and he sent electricity over there. And they used to tell stories about how they had these dances in the summertime at night outside, and about how when with single phase you'd have to cut the electricity off periodically because it would heat up. So they cut it off periodically on the dances, and the guys really liked it because they could slip off with the girls and make out with the girls when the power was
when
off.
It was dark.
When it was dark.
The White Sulphur Springs Hotel. Now, who built that?
It was a Sloan.
It was a Sloan? Okay. And weren't the Loves somewhat connected to that?
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Loves did it first. Maybe it was the Loves.
I know Sloan's owned it in the early 1900s.
Maybe more of the Loves built it.
I read something about it. I think it was James R. Love that had something to do
I
with
should
it.
have done more research. I could have given you more information than I'm giving you.
That's all right.
I know about all this. I just don't know all the details.
Well, it wouldn't have been James Harlow because he died in 1863.
Okay.
Robert Love, probably.
He had his will sets up all of his executors. It's a huge will, 29 pages long. But James R. Love died in 1863, and he turned it over to his sons and William Howell and Thomas. And
Well, the hotel was turned into a sanitarium in World War I.
It did.
Because of the Spanish flu, from
That's
what
right.
I've read.
That's correct.
And then at some point, was it torn down or did it burn down?
burned down.
Burned down.
It burned down. A lot of the old hotels did. So that must have been, because I know they occupied as a sanitarium until about early 1920s, and then and they didn't close it till early 30s, I thought.
Well, my parents were both from Waynesville. My dad was born here. My mother was born in Cashiers Valley. The Alleys were the first settlers of Cashiers Valley in Jackson County, original settlers. And so there's a Judge Felix Eugene Alley. He wrote the book Random Thoughts and Musings of a Mountaineer. You've probably seen that book. So he's a cousin, an uncle of mine. But so they got married here in Waynesville. They both went to school. My dad actually went to McCauley Military School in Tennessee. My mother went to school here. They got married, and he went to work at the Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company in Newport News. The CEO of that company was Ferguson from Waynesville. Homer Ferguson from Waynesville. So the story goes that anybody from Waynesville that wanted a job up there, if they were qualified in Newport News, could get a job there because of Homer Ferguson. So Dad worked up there, and I was born there on June the 9th of 1944, coming up soon. 70th birthday's coming up soon.
So you weren't born in Haywood County? I thought you were.
Well, they were up there during the war.
Sure.
And as soon as the war was over, they came back to Waynesville. And I've been here ever since, except that I spent 25 years also in Raleigh. I had a home both places when I was working in Raleigh and in Waynesville during all that time. So that's my beginnings. And I went through school here. Then I went to Chapel Hill, UNC Chapel Hill, to college and law school, and passed the bar in 1969. Joined the military in early 1970, National Guard. I was in that for 6 months, and joined my Uncle Zeb Alley's law firm in Waynesville, along with Bill. The firm was Miller, Medford, and Alley. It was Bill Millar, Bill Millar, and that's the father of the one that was in the firm when I got there, and Bill Medford, who later became district attorney out of Asheville. So the three of them, I joined that law firm after I got out of the military. And I've been here ever since then, practicing law with a lot of different people in Waynesville.
What type of law did you practice, or do you practice?
I don't now. I've quit. They quit me.
Takes a lot of effort to be a lawyer, for sure. And what was your specific focus area?
Well, I started practicing in 1970 and became county attorney in 1980 or 81. And so I was county attorney for 47 years.
Oh, wow.
So I did that along that time. But the first several years, during the 70s and 80s, I did a little bit of everything, including criminal law, domestic relations law, estate planning, real estate law. I did it all, and the county work. Although I didn't become county attorney until 1981, I guess it was. But then when I started practicing in Raleigh in January of 1991, I started limiting my Waynesville practice to the county work and real estate. And I did some real estate work in Raleigh too, but mostly in Raleigh I did business lobbying for various organizations, including Baxter Healthcare, NC Electric Membership Corporation, Registrar Deeds Association, and several